how I think about it, honestly. And I know you were talking about Chet and Paolo. I was wondering if you could kind of like go further into that.
Yeah, but before I get into that, I did want to say
Got you.
I think Malik Beasley's season is a large part of why this trade happened because Cade, very similar like trajectory to Paolo Banchero. Like he's not as good of a rim scorer, but he's a way more efficient mid range scorer. But both of them like
Yeah.
thrive getting to the rim and like creating for like other people, in my opinion. And I think seeing like the leap Cade took with like a real shooter next to him, I think the Orlando Magic
Yeah.
offense saw that and we're like, this will really open up the game for Paolo as well. So I want to give
I
Malik
agree. I
Beasley
agree.
his flowers. But in terms of Chet and Paolo, a recent conversation on Twitter has been it's a kind of a two-part conversation. It's like which player of the two is better right now between them because they went 1 and 2 in their draft.
Yeah.
And then did the Orlando Magic make a mistake taking Paolo? And I didn't know. Do you want to talk about this first before I give my opinion? Because
Um,
I've said this
I
a
mean,
long time.
as someone who doesn't know it, I would say no, just because Paolo is getting sorry LeBron comparisons. So it's like I feel like they kind of made the best pick that they had to make. I can see Paolo winning a championship for the Magic. That's just me though. But what do you think?
I think it's interesting because right now in time, I do think Chet Holmgren is the better of the two players, and I think a lot of people will look to being like, well, Chet is a number one option. It like anybody can be a number one option with like number one option usage. That doesn't mean you're going to win a championship as a number one option, but
Yeah,
like you could give like Cam Thomas for like the past couple seasons. Well, maybe Cam Johnson was this year, has been the number one option for the Nets. I like Cam Thomas. He was actually really impressive this year, like very good offensive player this season. I was
yeah,
very impressed. He's the number one option of the team. That doesn't mean like he's going to win a championship as the number one option. So
mm,
right now, I think like Chet's defensive impact and like what he brings offensively in terms of like making your offense more efficient, being a 7 footer who can shoot the ball like that and still
yeah,
score very effectively inside. I think currently he is the better player. Like I think if you ask the Thunder if you wanted to swap the two for this playoff run, they would say no because of the value that Chet brings.
for sure, for sure.
But in but I don't think the Magic would take their pick back because I think the archetype of player that Chet is more likely to be an effective primary initiator for a championship team than somebody like Chet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, because
Paolo could
he's a
handle the ball,
playmaker,
create
bro.
for himself, and you could see the vision of him being like you say LeBron, and like I do see a little bit of LeBron in his game in the way like he is able to get downhill. You would wish that he would like get downhill with like you would wish that he had like the aggressiveness of LeBron to get to the rim because I think that's like the one main drawback for Paolo is like man like you shoot like 35% on mid range shots. Like why do you keep like settling for these when you shoot like 71% at the rim? Like
Yeah,
and I know a lot of that is the spacing and they could just collapse the defense. So like completely understand. I think time will tell.
yeah,
But I don't think the Magic, like maybe now after the trade, if they really believe Franz could be the number one primary creator because he has been like better than Paolo the past couple of years. But I think Paolo like going into this season was on a upward trajectory, and I think the injury did like draw him back a little bit. But I was pretty impressed with like how he ended the year and how he played before the
dude.
injury.
Yeah,
So I don't think they would take the pick back. So like right now, I think Chet is the better player. I think the Magic would stick with their pick if you had given them the option to go back and redraft because I do think it's more likely that Paolo does become like a number one like primary option between
yeah,
the two, but I think it's more likely that Chet becomes the more impactful long term player because I think the road to seeing Paolo become the number one option is much more difficult than like Chet like just remaining who he is and like even getting better to that. Um, but I think it's a very interesting discussion because I think a lot of
yeah.
people
It's definitely like I understand those two are probably going to be compared to each other for the rest of their careers, kind of similarly to like Luca and Trey Young. Um, so it's going to be interesting because they're in two different positions where Chet is arguably at the start of what could be like an interesting dynasty, quote unquote. I'm not gonna put it out there yet because they have to do it, but he's in that position. Meanwhile, Paolo is kind of like creating his own,
yeah.
like he's trying to create his own thing, if that makes sense. So I it it's definitely interesting to see the comparisons between the two, and I think, like we said, like time will tell um between those two, and I'm excited to see them both.